Hey, welcome to the Worn Shoes podcast. My name is Zachary, and I interview people that have grown up around the world and learn about the extraordinary in their everyday lives. Today I'm talking with my friend Andrew, who grew up in Belgium. We talk a little bit about his life growing up in Belgium, when he transitioned to the United States, his senior year of high school, and a little bit about his faith journey. Hope that you guys enjoy our conversation. All right, Andrew, welcome to the Worn Shoes podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no worries. Excited to have you on. Yeah, to start off, could you tell me a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, what the word home means to you? Um, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up most of my life in Belgium, which is a small country in Western Europe. When I was really little, my family lived in Turkey and Istanbul for a few years. But by the time I was 5 years old, I was already in Belgium. And so I lived there until I was 17, and then we moved back to the States. So we moved to Greenville, South Carolina, and I lived there for a few years, and then I eventually moved to Florida for school, and I got married here, and so now I live in Orlando, Florida. Um, and I probably would consider that my home, seeing as
Hmm.
my wife is from here, and we live here now, and her family is also here. So I would probably consider Florida my home.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, growing up, a little bit of time spent in Istanbul, Turkey, but kind of the majority of growing up being in Belgium. Could you tell me a little bit what it was like to grow up in Belgium, some of your education and hobbies, and what it was like?
Yeah, so growing up in Belgium was um, pretty interesting. I think when I look back at
Yeah.
it now, it was a lot of fun.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I think early on when I was little, I kind of felt like a foreigner, but I think as I grew, I kind of felt more and more like I was one of them, like I was a Belgian.
Hmm.
Um, so I started, kindergarten there, and kind of grew up with all the other little Belgian kids in the public school system. So as time went on, it definitely got easier, I would say. But um, yeah, schooling in Belgium is a little intense.
Hmm.
In first grade, they're already teaching you how to read and write in cursive, and they don't waste any time.
Yeah.
So it can be challenging. I think once you get to like middle school, high school, it's very challenging.
Yeah.
They, it's they expect you, at least the school system expects most of your time and energy to go into school.
Hmm.
And so the downside of that is it really only allows for limited extracurricular activity, which I know in the States is like really important that you have a lot of, you can join clubs and do sports and all that stuff. In
Right.
Belgium, you don't really have a whole lot of time to do a lot of different things. So
Hmm.
that's a downside. But that being said, my one extracurricular activity that I could do was basketball. So I started
Yeah.
playing basketball pretty much when I got there and continued on until I eventually left. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So some pretty intense schooling, and then growing up playing basketball in Belgium. Um,
yeah.
yeah, and so you kind of mentioned with the extracurricular stuff, like was that kind of associated with the school you were going to, or was it like a club or?
So
Uh,
yeah, it's a good question. So in Belgium, sports and school, or really any curricular activity, is separate from school.
okay.
So all you're doing when you're at school is you're doing classes and schoolwork, and
Mm.
so if you want to do an extracurricular activity, you have to go to join a club. And they have, I mean, in Belgium they pretty much offer every sport, or you
Right.
can pretty much do whatever you want. You just have to find a club in which you can do that. So yeah, it's all separate. It's just, yeah, I think for Americans, it's just very, very different because they're so used to, sports and all that being connected to school. So
Hmm.
I think it can be hard for them to kind of imagine, you know, what it would be like if that weren't the case.
Yeah.
Um, so, but yeah, it was, joining a club. It's kind of cool. You have to like sign a contract, So I was like a
Mm-hmm.
little kid, and you have to like sign a contract, like you belong to the club.
Wow.
But it was a lot of fun because some of my best friends came from basketball because I met these kids when I was, yeah, like 5, 6 years old, and we ended up
Wow.
playing together and until we were 16, 17. So it was
Hmm.
a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Something you mentioned earlier yeah, I thought would be interesting is you kind of mentioned as a young kid really feeling like a foreigner, and then kind of as you got older, kind of starting to feel more Belgian. I guess what are some of the? I mean, yeah, I guess what are some of the things as a young kid that you kind of felt um, that kind of made you stand apart, and then as you kind of got older and yeah, started identifying more with being Belgian, what were some of those things that you're kind of able to, I don't know, integrate and connect with in Belgium?
So um, I think the big thing when I got there was I didn't know the language.
Hmm.
So in the north
Yeah.
of Belgium, they speak Dutch or Flemish, and in the south of Belgium, they speak French. But I didn't know the language, and I also just really knew nothing of the culture.
Hmm.
Um, and there's always, anytime you go to a new culture, there are big cultural differences, and then there are small little nuances that really kind of take a long time to for you to kind of identify and understand. And when I was little, it was more the bigger cultural things that were kind of in my face. I had to learn the language, so I was a little
Right.
behind there, and I also, um, just wasn't. It was a lot of firsts for me. Like the first schooling I did was in Belgium, so I
Hmm.
just kind of felt like I was growing up with them. But when I would go home to an American household
Hmm.
where my parents were American and spoke English, and I was also labeled that way by others.
Yeah.
Even though I was literally starting kindergarten with them, I was always the American. And I think as I got older, I I started to kind of understand the little nuanced differences, and I
Hmm.
was able to kind of adapt to those. And by that point, I started to build some relationships, and um, I think I was always viewed as an American,
Right.
and I believe that as well. If someone
Hmm.
tells you you're American all the time, you're going to believe it.
Hmm.
But I think I was really more Belgian than I was American, and I
Yeah.
really only fully grasped that when I left and moved to the States.
Hmm.
So, um, yeah, it's kind of It's kind of an interesting dynamic that you don't really know what you have or what you're going through until you're not in that stage anymore and you're kind of looking back. So,
Yeah. No, I relate to that, and I mean that's kind of the, I don't know, it's kind of the quintessential like TCK experience, right? It's like growing up, you're like, oh yeah, I'm my what my parents' culture is. I'm an American, and then you come back to the States and you're like, oh, I'm not. I'm I'm not like Azerbaijani or
right.
Belgian necessarily, but like I'm definitely not American. It's kind of that feeling. So I relate to that where yeah, kind of growing up, I was like, well, not a Zeri, so I guess I'm American. And then I got back to the States. It's like, yeah, maybe not.
I don't really belong here.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of along that line. I mean, yeah, growing up in Belgium, and then you mentioned coming back to the States in Greenville to go to high school. Could you talk a little bit about that transition and maybe what that was like for you? Yeah,
Yeah. So we had to move that year. So typically, like, because I have older siblings, and when my older siblings move, they move for college, which is
hmm.
kind of the norm. Um, but for me, we had to move. We didn't have a choice, so we moved, and I had to do my senior year in high school, and um, yeah, it was really challenging. There were a ton of challenges that I was not prepared for at all.
Yeah,
I think the main one being that I didn't realize how quote unquote un-American I was until I
yeah,
was actually in the States. Because, and I'm sure you can relate to this, growing up, we would spend time in the States periodically, for like vacations or,
right.
when we had to go visit churches and whatnot. So it's not like American culture was totally foreign to me. Um, but when I moved back and I was actually like a citizen, it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, and I was like,
Hmm.
wow, like I I have nothing in common with my peers.
Hmm.
Um, and
Yeah,
yeah, it was really hard, especially being a senior in high school. A lot of a lot of friendships have formed already, and they're also getting a lot of kids are obviously about to go to college, so there wasn't a lot of room or space to like build new relationships in school.
yeah,
And I'm not the most social person, so like if I'm not really like getting approached by people, then
right.
I'm just not really going to make a ton of friends.
Hmm.
um so yeah, I would say it was really hard. I think I do wonder though, Belgium having some similarities with the States. I wonder in your experience, Azerbaijan obviously very different than
Yeah,
Belgium. What was it like for you, kind of going to the States? And where did you
yeah.
move to? Because I'm not sure. Where did you move?
Yeah, yeah, and I guess I might as well say this because for people that maybe listening that don't know, but me and Andrew, so our parents were with the same missions organizations, so we've had connections pretty much through our whole life. Every 4 to 6 years, seeing each other at different retreats or back in the States. So yeah, so we've known each other for a really long time, but in kind of a very missionary kid TCK type of way. So yeah, it's been fun to reconnect. But yeah, we've never kind of really talked about like our whole story, so this is pretty fun. But yeah, for me, I graduated high school when I was 19, and then moved back to the States to go to college. I moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is where I'm at now, which
Hmm.
I'm coming up on 7 or 8 years, I think. And we were in Azerbaijan for 10 years, so in a little bit it'll be equal. And kind of you were talking about earlier about Orlando, feeling like home, especially kind of with your wife's family. I think I relate to that a lot with
Yeah.
Chattanooga. Um, but yeah, Azerbaijan is pretty different, from from the United States.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't even really fit in a category, right? Like Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Armenia, kind of like Middle East, Central Asia, Europe. They're not even like really sure necessarily where they want to fit in. And I think, yeah, coming back to the States, I had a really strong desire to kind of fit in, and because I think I did kind of, like you said, kind of have that overwhelming sense of like, okay, I thought I was American, but I definitely not. After talking to, to a couple of people or being in community, and I think for a while, I was born in Los Angeles, California. So I would tell people like, yeah, from California, Hollywood, which at that time I didn't realize that had a certain association, being in
Right.
Chattanooga in the South. And so I got, some weird looks, but for some other reasons. And then that wasn't until I met another guy. His name's Brad, and he's an actual Californian, grew up in California, and he's like, oh yeah, in LA, like what Cali or where? And I was like, oh shoot. I got called out.
Exposed.
Yeah, exposed as a not a real American. So yeah, I think coming back my first year was pretty fun. It was all like new and exciting, and then I think my second and third year, it hit and got pretty difficult.
Hmm.
But yeah, with
Interesting.
yeah, I wanted to ask you. I mean, because I had the opportunity to kind of graduate high school, and a lot of my friends, that I was going to school with, I was able, we're all going off to college. We're all kind of going and doing our own thing. And yeah, I imagine that because senior year, I mean, because I've had my senior year of high school and my senior year of college. I mean, it really is like a special time with like your closest friends. I mean, my senior year of college, I was able to, live in a house with all my closest friends, and we were able. It was probably my favorite year of college. And then in high school, we had senior trips and all of that. So I can't imagine, yeah, coming back to the States to a totally new high school and new people, for my senior
Yeah.
year. And I kind of wanted to ask. I mean, yeah, that seems incredibly difficult. I mean, even if you're within the same culture, if you were in the States and moving, towns or whatever.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to ask, yeah, I mean, you mentioned your other siblings and going to college, but kind of why did your family, yeah, choose to move back? Because I mean, it seems to me that would probably be the most difficult for you. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It was very difficult. So we so for those that don't know, when you're a missionary with MTW, after 6 years you have to come back to the States for, they call it furlough, for 6 months.
hmm,
And so we did not do that, and so instead we stayed 12 years. But
hmm,
then because of that, we had to stay in the States for a whole year instead of just 6 months.
hmm,
So we were kind of at the limit of, okay, you have to come back now, and you have to come for at least a year.
hmm,
So that was kind of the circumstances behind it. But in terms of like the kind of the struggle, I think, like you said, it's a very difficult situation. And I think, I think there are those that can kind of, do their best to, make it, uh, like the least amount of difficulty, kind of trying your best to get by. In my case, I was not able to do that.
hmm,
I think I was kind of caught in between two worlds where I was like desperately trying to hold on to my life in Belgium, and the relationships I had built over, a 12-year span.
yeah.
But so that kind of kept me from probably building relationships that year, in high school, because, I was holding on to those relationships. And I think what really, what really kind of brought the hammer down in terms of just going through a really difficult time was realizing that the people back in Belgium, they weren't holding on to me.
Hmm,
So they're moving on with their lives, and I just kind of felt like I was stuck in limbo,
yeah.
where, I'm trying to hold on, but they're not holding on to me. And then it was also kind of like, what's the point of making connections here? Everyone's about to go off to college. So yeah, it was really hard. Especially the high school I went to. It was kind of like a big high school. It was a public school, and it was kind of known for being kind of preppy.
Right.
And so, you know, like sophomores were driving to school, had their own cars. I didn't have
Hmm,
my license.
yeah.
So I was the only senior riding the bus to school.
Yeah. Hmm,
Another thing our school did, which I don't know why they did this, but you had like a colored lanyard dependent on what grade you were in. So everyone knew, oh, that's a senior. That's like you had to wear this
Hmm.
lanyard. So
Yeah.
everyone knew I was a senior.
And you
Um,
were the only senior on the bus
I was
that
the
year?
only senior on the
Oh,
bus, and then
jeez.
I was so I made the basketball team, so I made some friends on the basketball team, but
Right.
none of them I didn't have lunch with any of them.
Hmm.
So for lunch hour, I walk in, it's like full. There's like nowhere to sit. And so for like the first month or so, I just sat with like a bunch of freshmen, and they were like my friends for the first like
Yeah.
month and a half of school, which
Yeah.
um, was kind of fun. I had fun with those guys, but
Yeah.
it was definitely for them. They looked at me like I was an alien. Like,
Yeah.
they're these little freshmen, kind of nervous about being in high school, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Why is this senior sitting with us?"
And I mean that was
So,
something you could probably relate to more so than any of the other seniors as freshmen
yeah,
coming
exactly.
in. Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was difficult to say the least.
Yeah, and I mean you talked about kind of really trying to hold on to that life in those relationships in Belgium where they're all kind of moving off and doing their own thing. Yeah, and no, that sounds yeah really hard, and I think it is something I relate to with coming back. Is there's definitely relationships and friendships that I think yeah I really wanted to hold on and identify myself with, and I like even as I was saying I was from California to everyone else, I was trying to hold on to these relationships and feelings and ideas, and I think for me at least that led to kind of a really I, I I think I've talked about this in the past with kind of other on this podcast where I feel like within the you know spectrum of like TCKs, I feel like there's those that like really strongly identify with their the culture they grew up in that country and really kind of hold on to that. And I think and there's others that are kind of like, which I feel like this is the category that I kind of fall into or fell into for a while, was kind of where I was like, okay, no one here is gonna get Azerbaijan or anything about that. So I might as well just kind of shut that part of my life off, and I'm gonna try to be the best, most fit in, chameleon American I can, and just kind of really to the point of like even that there's the Mukapa, the missionary kid group, and there were and all of that stuff. I was like, I don't want anything to do with you guys. I'm gonna find all my American friends, and I think for me, I was kind of like, if I can't hold on to this, then I'm just gonna throw it out the window, and really try and move on to this new thing. And I think, since then, I think
Yeah.
I've healed, and I've figured out that like, okay, I don't have to do that in order to, to live here, and I've found more like I guess balance with that identity and experiences. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
but
I
yeah, I
think
don't
it
know. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it goes to show that there's really just no easy way to do it.
Hmm.
Like it's gonna be difficult. I guess you just have to try and do the best you can. But yeah, there's no like one way that's gonna be easier or harder necessarily. It's just,
Right.
yeah, it's not an easy thing to go through. So
Hmm.
especially when you're like a teenager
Yeah.
and you think you know stuff and you don't really know anything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's funny. It's funny you say that you said that you were from California,
Hmm.
because now when anyone asks me where I'm just like Greenville, South Carolina. I'm like,
Really? Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't want. I'm just so tired of going through. Oh, Belgium, tell me.
Yeah.
I've had too many of those conversations. So I'm
Yeah.
like Greenville, South Carolina, and then someone that knows me well, they'll be like, "No, you're not," and I always give them a look like, "Now's not the time."
Dude, the friends that call you out, it's the worst.
Oh, it's the
So let me
worst.
be from California, man. Chill out.
It's like,
Um,
dude, I
yeah.
don't need to go in my whole life story right now.
No, and I think like, and it is even like with Azerbaijan, like it's when you tell someone, it's like hard because I don't know. I feel like I see people's like eyes kind of like glaze over because they have like no idea where that is, but they don't want to like say that.
Right.
It's like yeah. Um yeah, but kind of with you being like saying that you're from Greenville and that kind of being the easy answer out. Yeah, I guess with going to high school and then what did kind of life look like with graduating and then kind of yeah after high school? Did you stay in Greenville? And you mentioned
Yeah.
making the basketball team. I don't know. Yeah.
So yeah, that I guess that's where things I guess kind of went downhill for me a little bit.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
struggled so much that year that I was so kind of depleted emotionally, and I was probably a little depressed as well. That
Yeah.
I just didn't have any motivation to go to school. I told my parents, I was like, listen, I I'm not I don't want to go to college right now. I don't
Hmm.
know what I want to do. I'm kind of dealing through things. For a little while, I wanted to go back to Belgium, and I was kind of looking at options, and
Yeah.
that kind of became a dead end after a while. And so I started working, and so I started working full time. And maybe a year after that, my mom was like, "Okay, you have to go to college now."
Hmm.
So I was like, "Okay." And so Greenville actually has a pretty good community college, and so I enrolled in community college that following year, and didn't do very well.
Hmm.
I didn't really want to go, so I wasn't very motivated. It wasn't that hard really, but I was, looking back at it now, I finally got a bachelor's degree, so I can kind of laugh about it now.
Yeah.
But at the time, my mom was pretty upset. Like pretty much every semester, I would have to withdraw from a class.
Hmm. Yeah.
It I didn't really take it too serious. It was almost like high school in the sense that like I have to be here.
Right.
And obviously, community college is like very different than like a 4 year school, like a
Yeah.
Covenant. Those you can't really even compare those two.
Hmm.
So yeah, I struggled for a while, but I think what really kind of where things started to turn around and I started to kind of get out of that funk that I was in was really relationships. It takes a while to gain good friends, and I think over time I started to kind of get close friends that could kind of that actually kind of got to know me a little bit, and they actually also happened to be uh, you know not Native Americans in terms of like they were from they were Burmese, and so we kind of had a few things in common, but it was really the
Yeah.
relationships that kind of pulled me out of kind of a dark place. And
Hmm.
you know I you know I eventually had um, kind of a big moment in my life where I felt God really kind of change who I was as a person and kind of call me in a certain direction. And so that's actually what led me to Florida. Is I actually dropped out of community college,
Hmm.
and which was a huge mistake. Should have
Hmm.
just got my associate's degree. Big mistake.
Yeah.
But I ended up going to a small Bible college in near Orlando, Florida. So that's kind of how I ended up here.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah. That's a
yeah.
lot. That's kind of
It's a lot. It
the
was a lot to
yeah.
tell you. I covered like I think maybe 6 years there or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Something that you kind of said early on that you kind of mentioned wanting to go back to Belgium for a little bit, and then that those doors kind of that kind of ended up being a dead end. I think is what you said. Um,
yeah,
and I feel like that's I mean, at least with the people I've talked to, I feel like that's a fairly common experience. It's just kind of like, and it was for me. Like I wanted to go back to Azerbaijan, and that was my plan for 3 years, and then my senior, I was gonna go back somehow. And I think since then
Yeah.
that's changed for me too. But I guess I kind of wanted to ask, what was your kind of, other than just kind of relationships and people, what was kind of the desire there, and then what kind of ended up for that not working?
Yeah. So I think, part of that desire to go back was just because, again, I was hanging on. I was hanging on to all that stuff desperately, and so
Mm-hmm.
the best way to hang on was to go back. And I think, you asked in the beginning of kind of our conversation about what home is, where home is for me, and at that time, Belgium was home. Belgium was definitely home. I did not feel at home at all in Greenville, South Carolina. So, and it's interesting because I don't really think I understood what home was then.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I kind of tried. There was an American university in Brussels that I could potentially attend.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as time went on, and also my parents were, especially my dad, he was, he really wanted me to stay in the States because he knew that it would be good for me. Like it was something he thought I really needed. And,
Hmm.
um, he did relent. He was like, listen, if you really want to go back to Belgium, I'm not going to stop you from doing that. Um, but I think kind of listening to my dad and as time went on, the pain of leaving Belgium was kind of lessened. And I think gaining friends here that could kind of help me through a tough time. I just kind of realized that this was the hand that I was dealt, and I kind of it's up to me now to kind of make the best for it. And I guess I started to see the benefits of staying in the States and pursuing education or a career, whatever it may be. But yeah, so that's the Belgium thing kind of died
Yeah.
out a little bit.
Yeah. No, I mean, you have kind of mentioned, your mom kind of pushing you towards community college, and then your dad kind of wanting you to stay in the States. And I guess I'm wondering, um, yeah, just kind of with parental guidance, I guess, around around these things, and what trying to figure out what my question is. But I don't know, that's just kind of something I've yeah noticed. And yeah, because you said you started working full time after college, and then your mom kind of pushing you towards community college. I guess I'm curious, and I'm curious what your feelings and perceptions are of kind of, it seems like there's a strong desire maybe for them, for you to kind of stay in the States, um which I don't know if that was, what was that kind of like, I guess. And
Yeah, no,
yeah.
that's a good question. So for my parents, so to give a little bit of context, Belgium, the church in Belgium is almost non-existent, which is
Hmm.
kind of how it is all over Western Europe. And so, the church that we attended was not very similar to like churches they have here in the States, where, it's a real community.
Hmm.
It's something that you're really like, you can really be a part of, and, you're really like, you're the body of Christ. I you don't really get that in Belgium because there just aren't really that many Christians. And
Yeah.
so I think the biggest thing for my parents was they wanted me to experience that kind of church community. And
Hmm.
they rightfully so, they really believed in it. They knew that it would really help me a lot. And so I was pretty hesitant to that because I didn't really trust anybody for a long time. I didn't
Hmm.
really trust people, but
Yeah.
um, in hindsight, they were right, and in hindsight, I can say confidently that yeah, that really was a huge thing that I was missing. growing up. And actually, I wonder what was it like in Azerbaijan, the church, the whole like church scene, and also
Yeah.
one thing I'm really curious about is how was it going to Covenant, which is obviously a Christian college. My sister went to a Christian college and it did not go so well. So I'm curious
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah. I mean, for the church in Azerbaijan, I mean, we, yeah, we attended a local church, where there was kind of a local pastor, preaching in Azerbaijani, for the most part. So I think, as you know, when we were younger kids and going through middle school, I think it was we had, friends there and community, and it was really good. I think as we got older, I think more towards our teenage years, I felt like um, our Azerbaijani was not as good as our Russian, and I think we started to express kind of a desire for, kind of our native language, I guess, and feeling like we needed, I guess, ministry or church, in like, and I guess in English, and so we ended up. We also had like a little house church, so which was our family and teammates from like MTW, and then a couple other close friends. So I
Hmm.
think that was really good. I think growing up, and I mean, yeah, I think as a missionary kid, it is weird because I think it's, you kind of view the church, and even to an extent just kind of religion, as this thing that you and your family, as work, and and I think that's
Yeah,
something,
it's a great point.
like even as a kid, it's like, it's it felt hard for me to kind of really connect with the church and kind of my own faith journey, because it's like, this is like our family's job, I guess, which is like,
Yeah, right.
like intellectually, there's like all kinds of stuff, and I'm sure, there, whatever, there's theological issues with that. I don't know, but yeah, I think coming back to the States, and going to Covenant College, there's a lot there, and I think it feels like a pretty polarizing place from like people that I've talked to.
Hmm.
I think, there's people that really disliked it, and I think there's people that have really really enjoyed and benefited from it. I think for me, um I mean, yeah, I had a pretty positive experience, all things considered. I think there's I don't know, how do I put this. um I, I think some I think I was able to kind of stay fairly disconnected from a lot of kind of, I don't know, the issues that people generally had with like Covenant, specifically like administration and professors and stuff. For me, it just felt like I was able to go and do my classes. The community I had, the community of guys was like really, really solid, especially my senior year. And the 3 times a week chapel was really, really great. So, yeah, all things considered, for me, it was like a really positive experience. I think like in terms of church stuff, that was a little bit more difficult. I feel like, because going to a Christian school is not, it's not a church. It's not the church. So I
Right.
think, yeah, finding and feeling comfortable in a church has been a little bit more of a difficult journey for me. Kind of finding that. Um, but yeah, no, I think that's it's a good question. It's not something I usually think about, but because I guess I'm not like super opinionated about Covenant.
Right.
I don't know, like, because I feel like, yeah, it's a pretty solid place, and like it
Yeah.
has its issues, but I mean, it's not necessarily something that I feel the need to or desire to get up in arms about, I guess.
The reason I ask is because
Yeah.
Covenant is kind of like the MTW kids, a
Yeah.
lot of them end up at Covenant, and
Right.
it's one of the bigger Christian schools out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've known a lot of people that have gone, and like you said, it's, I guess, a little polarizing. Some people have good experience, some
Yeah.
people have not so good experiences. I'm sure that's not just the school's fault. Just
Yeah.
the culture shock and transition is very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've known people that have um, gone to these Christian schools and then have kind of gotten alienated from the faith because they felt like it
Oh,
was
shoot.
so different, and Christian schools, and all of a sudden being in this Christian
Hmm.
environment, it's not what they expected, and it can kind of turn them away, just like from the faith in general. And so that's kind of why I was asking to kind of see what your experience. And I'm obviously very happy that that wasn't your
No.
experience.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, it has been, it's been difficult kind of post college and graduation, because I have had friends that have kind of left the faith, and these are, I think that is something that's kind of difficult to see. And yeah, I think I'm still kind of trying to figure out, I'm 26. I'm still trying to figure out, my own faith and journey and stuff. So I feel like I have empathy for people that have fallen away,
Yeah,
because I feel
absolutely.
like I like some of the reasonings and rationale, and feelings around that. I feel like I'm able to empathize with some of those things, and at the same time, I feel like the gospel is true, and that's something I want to try and hold on to. But yeah. I mean, you're kind of putting me on the spot with like faith and all this stuff.
I know
Yeah,
this is your podcast, but you better be ready to answer some tough
yeah, no,
questions.
no. Thanks for pushing me on that. Can I? Yeah. What about you with yeah, high school? And I mean, you talked a little bit about the church in Belgium, but what has your kind of journey with all of that been?
You mean like in terms of like faith or like schooling or?
Yeah, faith and church and yeah, and all of that.
Yeah, so I think there was, after I moved, I don't I don't think I experienced the, like, you're in a Christian college and that kind of alienation I was talking about earlier. But I didn't like get here to the States and immediately be like, oh, church is awesome. Like, let me just, yeah. So it was hard at first to kind of get connected to a church because it was so foreign to me.
Yeah.
And kind of much to the dismay of my parents, I was not, I was the guy that kind of would show up for the sermon and then leave before
Mm,
before the benediction, so
yeah.
I didn't have to talk to anybody.
Hmm. Can I
um
ask real quick? You said it was kind of
yeah.
foreign to you. What parts of church in the U.S. were foreign to you, or what felt foreign?
um I think that's a good
Yeah.
question. I think the people, because I was still learning kind of the American culture.
Right.
And so, people were very different. Like in Belgium, they don't really have like politeness. And,
Hmm.
I mean, you were in Chattanooga,
Yeah.
so you kind of know what it's
Yeah.
like in the
Yeah.
South. There's this level of politeness that everyone has. And, over the years, I've grown to
Right.
love it. But when I first got there,
Yeah.
I was like, don't people don't talk to each
Yeah.
other, in Belgium. Like, they kind of do their own thing. They go to
Mm-hmm.
church, they worship, and then they go
Right.
home. And so, after, like, I think one of the biggest aspects of church that really kind of gave me anxiety was when the service was over, they were like, all right, greet those around you. And I was like, oh gosh,
I'm not
this is
doing
kind of
that. Yeah.
awkward, like I'm not ready for
Right.
this. So I think, yeah, I think it was that, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you said just kind of with the yeah, South and plight and all of that, because I think coming back for me, that culture felt more comfortable to me. I was more kind of off put by the kind of um I don't even know how to say it, but just kind of like very direct, the directness, I guess. And I don't know if it's necessarily like
Mm.
a northern thing or like an American thing inherently, but I felt like I was kind of off put when people kind of told me directly like what they thought or felt or wanted.
Right.
And I think, yeah, because there's a much more indirect culture, I guess, in Azerbaijan, and even relating with my friends,
Mm.
it's just very, yeah, it was just very indirect, and no one was like, all right, here's what I want to do. And I was, and I think for me, getting to college and then people being like, you know just incredibly direct about their needs and wants, which I guess, there's a certain extent to that, which I guess is good. I don't know. But I think that was a lot more off putting to me.
Yeah, it was very very foreign for me, and
Yeah.
um like I don't know about Chattanooga. I've only been there a few times, but in
Yeah.
South Carolina, people love to talk.
Yeah.
Like they talk, they just love to talk, and
Yeah.
that was very different for me. Like in Belgium, you don't even like nod when you walk past somebody on the street,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know?
It's
Like
just,
people kind of get upset if you like say something to them.
yeah,
So that was very
different.
very different, and it was like maximized at church, obviously.
Right.
So I think that kind of um scared me away a little bit,
Hmm.
and also just personal like struggles I was going through also
Yeah.
kind of kept me from church. And yeah, I think I'm very thankful to God that even though I was really struggling, I still kept showing up. I mean, I didn't go every Sunday, but for the
Right.
most part, like I guess having just gone to church my whole life, I just felt like I should go. And um, yeah, it kind of turned around later on in my life where I kind of, you know, was kind of affirmed in what I believed. And so I kind of
Yeah.
I saw like the importance of it, and like it's okay that it's uncomfortable, like you can, it's okay to push through that a little bit because it's worth it.
Yeah.
So I think that's when it changed for me.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. I think, yeah, kind of you've talked about kind of, yeah, church and Greenville, and then kind of ending up in Orlando, Florida. Kind of in line with that. What are, like, as a TCK? I mean, you've kind of talked about Belgium and trying to hold on to there and some of your friends and stuff, and then struggling coming back here with high school and community college. Now, kind of, what are some of the places that you've been able to find community, or that you've been able to kind of create community and feel connected, if that's something that you have been able to do?
Yeah. So I think, well, like we've been talking about, I think church is probably my primary source of community.
Mm.
But then probably school. I went to a Bible. I ended up at a Christian school.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to a small kind of Bible college. And so probably my best friends are from school.
Yeah.
Guys I lived with for a while, and we kind of went through school together. And so probably those two. I don't really have like an outlet of like social activities. I guess maybe I
Yeah.
should get one. I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah, mostly
um,
church and kind of the friends that you made going
what about
to
what
going to
about for
school.
you? Do you have any like social outlets where you're building new relationships at all?
I think that's something I'm definitely struggling with. I think in that, I feel like that's more in terms of just transitioning into like adulthood, I guess, and feeling
Yeah.
like those avenues are kind of more limited. I think some of the things for me that where I've been able to find community is I do rock climbing here in Chattanooga, and so I think I've found a couple of people that where I'm able to plug into that community a little bit. And then with some of my friends from college, I played D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. So outing myself
Really?
here, but yeah. So that
We do. We could do a whole another podcast just on that topic. I'm
okay.
very, I'm very interested in
Okay, yeah. But
that.
yeah, that used to be a weekly occurrence. I think our DM, him and his wife are having a kid, so I think that's been
uh,
put a little bit on hold. But yeah, I think D&D is a fun connection place, and then rock climbing. Um, yeah, and I think church, because we've been hopping around a lot and have just recently kind of found a spot. I think that hasn't been so much a community, but I'm hoping that it does kind of become that.
are your parents still in Azerbaijan, or are they in the States?
They yeah, they went back about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, because my youngest sister got married. Um, but yeah, they're back
Okay.
in Azerbaijan now. But it's just them. All three of the kids are stateside. Um, they're coming
Okay.
back October or November, I think, and they'll be here for a couple months. But yeah, yeah,
So
they're still over there.
technically, their permanent residence is still in Azerbaijan. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think yeah, that's kind of their plan. So yeah, it was actually really fun because this past December, me and my wife and Kaylee, or my youngest sister and my other sister with their at the times their boyfriends, we were all able to go to Azerbaijan and kind of visit as like an extended family, and that was my wife's
Oof.
first time visiting,
Wow.
and it was pretty fun.
How was that? How was that for you? Like getting to show your wife kind of like where you grew up. What was that like?
I yeah, it was interesting. I think because well, I guess yeah, it was good, but I think I struggled because that was my first time back in 5 years. So I think
Oh,
I
okay.
felt more like a foreigner. My Russian is not where it used to be. A lot has changed in Baku, the capital. So yeah, I think I struggled because I didn't feel like I was necessarily like I don't know, like I was returning home. It felt a little more like going to kind of a foreign country, which I think was hard because I tend tended to associate that with home. But I think I was able to kind of show a lot of things to Michelle that
Okay. Well, that's really interesting to kind of go back to you getting that opportunity to show,
yeah,
because Olivia, my wife, she came to Belgium not 2 years ago now.
yeah,
And I had been back already, so our experiences were probably a little bit different in that regard,
mm-hmm,
because I had a great time, like just
yeah,
kind of getting to show her like Belgian culture and where I grew up, and it
yeah.
was so much fun.
Oh, that's awesome. That kind of segues into my next question of like, so you with growing up in Belgium and kind of all of that, how have you kind of integrated that experience or your experiences growing up and you know Belgian culture? How have you integrated that kind of in your life today? And I don't know, how, yeah, if that makes sense.
Um, yeah, it's kind of a hard one.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know if there's anything like particularly Belgian that I've like integrated into my life, but
yeah,
I do think I've gained a lot of just experience, and with experience comes knowledge and um, skills. I think I'm a very like you used the word chameleon earlier,
yeah,
and the kind of the ability to fit in wherever you can kind of talk to anybody.
yeah,
That's definitely a skill that a lot of TKCs or TCKs
yeah,
have, that they can communicate with people that are very different than themselves. And
yeah,
um, so yeah, I think it's more just experience that I have that I kind of apply to daily life. That the ability to be able to talk to anyone and kind of fit in
yeah,
anywhere, it's really valuable. Especially like I'm looking for jobs right now. So looking for
yeah.
jobs, that's a great quality to have.
Yeah.
because people are always worried. Can you fit in with this environment? It's like, well, yeah, trust me, I can fit into this
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah. Hmm.
So
Yeah. No, yeah, I think I relate to that because I don't know if there's anything I've necessarily like taken really, to heart or like kind of from Azeri culture, other than maybe having a above average appreciation for tea, I guess. um, but yeah, no, I think that ability to kind of connect with a lot of different types of people and
it's funny
yeah.
when we were when we were kids, and we would be at these retreats, and the Williamses from Azerbaijan. I remember always thinking, like, where the heck is Azerbaijan? Like, I know nothing about I know nothing about
Yeah,
Azerbaijan. Um, so yeah, I remember always thinking that, and I don't remember thinking seeing you guys like being
right.
like, oh, dude, these are the most American people I've ever met.
Wait, us? Oh, really?
Yeah, I'd be like,
Oh,
you're
that's
super
interesting.
American, but
Yeah.
just on the
Huh.
outside.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. I always remembered going to those retreats, and because I think for a while they had the Europe and Enterprise ones. I think maybe like
Yeah, they were
connected.
called Enterprise.
Right. Yeah, they had them like connected, and so we always got to go with the Europe missionary kids, and I was really like, oh man, they're so cool. They get to live in Europe. I
I
was
know,
like,
it's so different.
yeah, yeah, it's different, but no, it's a wild time, man. Yeah, I guess to close out, I guess if there's anything else that kind of is that you would want to share, any parting words or wisdom or fun story or whatever, if there's anything like that. And then also, I haven't done this the last couple of episodes, but I've tried to like make it, I don't know what you call it, my motif, my like thing is the name of the podcast is Worn Shoes, right? And the idea is the shoes that have been the most worn have traveled the most places. And so I
Mm,
want to end every episode asking people what their favorite type of what their favorite shoe is that they have. What is their most worn shoe? But I haven't done a good job of doing that. But I do want to ask you what your favorite shoe is, what your most worn shoe is, and then if you have any final thoughts or
okay.
yeah,
Like, with worn shoe, you mean like a shoe that I own right now?
it
Like,
could be
or like
anything. Yeah,
any shoe in my lifetime?
any shoe in your lifetime that's that has a special place in your heart, or your favorite walking shoe, your favorite lounging shoe. It can be however you want to
Um,
interpret it.
that's a good question. Um, Probably. So I had these red, I had these red like sneaker like shoes.
Mm-hmm.
They were actually Derrick Rose. They weren't basketball shoes, but they were just
Yeah.
like kind of more casual. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess those shoes come to mind because they were part of the transition from Belgium to the States.
Hmm.
So those are kind of memorable, I guess.
Yeah.
My favorite shoes now, though, are definitely just the most comfortable shoes that I can find.
Yeah. That that's actually really interesting. You're saying it's part of your transition to the States. What do you mean by yeah.
So, like, for me growing up, and even now, really, like, my shoes, most of my, at least the shoes I wear often, they probably last like maybe, I don't know, like a 2 year and a half, 2 years, and then they kind of
Mm-hmm.
wear out. And so those particular shoes, I had like a year in my last year in Belgium, and then I kind of had in my senior year, my first year in the States. So that's what I mean with kind of like
Hmm.
transition.
Yeah.
And they were awesome. I
Yeah.
loved those shoes. I just thought I thought I was so cool.
Yeah.
I wearing those shoes. I don't know if I actually was, but I felt it at least. So,
um
and then let's see. I'm not gonna give any like words of wisdom at the
yeah,
end.
no, that's
I
fair.
don't think I have any of
That's
that.
fair.
But I can. I do have kind of, I guess, a funny story that's
Yeah.
kind of speaks to the whole culture shock thing. But I
Mm-hmm.
remember it was probably within a few months of me being in the States. There was a kid on the basketball team at the high school that reached out to me. He was really very nice.
Mm-hmm.
He reached out to me and he was like, "Hey, like you should come hang out with some of my friends, kind of get to know." And I was like, "Okay, this will be, it's nice what he's doing." And so, um, you know, keep in mind this is like my first interaction with like pretty much everything American, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so we go to this like little pizza place and we like eat pizza, and then obviously we do like separate checks, and they come and bring the check, and they take your card and then they bring it back, and I see everyone like writing in there and they're like tipping. And I was like, okay, I know,
Yeah.
in the States they tip. So I get the bill, and the pizza was like $10. And
Okay.
I look at the bill and I'm like, I have no idea how much I should tip.
Yeah.
Like, because I was thinking like I'm pretty sure it's like 20%, but that's $2.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
am I
Yeah.
really just gonna leave this guy
Yeah.
$2?
$2.
So and I'm like a little uncomfortable because they've obviously done this a million times, so it's like
Yeah.
nothing. But I'm kind of like nervously like looking around, and I remember I ended up tipping the guy like $5 or something on like a $10 bill. And I didn't find out until much later that guy, that waiter, probably was very happy with that.
Yeah. Oh wow.
But yeah, that was one of
That's
those
funny.
moments they don't really prepare you for. You're like, oh.
Well, dude, thanks for being on the podcast and chatting. It was an honor and a privilege to hear some of your story, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun, so I enjoyed it.
All right. Sweet. Well, take care. Hey guys, thanks for tuning into this episode. I hope that you enjoyed my conversation with Andrew. If you did, I encourage you to go check out the Instagram and Facebook pages where all updates concerning the podcast will be posted. Next episode will come out the end of September, so stay tuned for that. Thank you all for your continued support of the Worn Shoes podcast.